probably a good time and point to introduce Harriet. So thank you very much, Hannah, for all of that. Really, really useful. But yeah, introducing Harriet, who's a colleague of mine on the SJP side of things. So worked heavily within kind of financial education, which has kind of been morphed into financial well-being now. But starting off, Harriet, I suppose, just to throw you right in at the deep end, there's lots of misconceptions and you know, information that's wrong, but it'd be really good just to clear up your thoughts on the differences, I suppose, between financial education, guidance and advice, as a sort of get some more clarity on that to start with.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, the main difference is down to the regulator, really. So education is really high level information. Often that will come in a similar kind of structure to Justine's point there, kind of an overall session, high level principles of money. So important because we weren't taught it at schools. So we kind of need to make up for that now and build that base level of knowledge. And a lot of it is this unconscious incompetence as well. Like, we don't know what we don't know. Therefore, it's just starting to tweak your interest and sort of start to think about things. Guidance is then going one level deeper. So it's talking about different kind of solutions, maybe different principles, different options that you've got, but it's offering the full range of options within a certain area that you're talking about. Where guidance differs from advice is I'm recommending a course of action. So of all of those options based on your circumstance, this is the route I would recommend. Now, to be giving advice, you have to be regulated, which makes sense. But it does pose a slight issue with guidance. We're seeing loads and loads of different providers of guidance now, which is fantastic, and it's making it way more accessible. It's absolutely the missing piece in our financial wellbeing puzzle in the UK. But it does open the scope for kind of unqualified people to give misinformation. And that is only kind of one of the main things to think about, is who's going to be providing that advice and are they equipped to do so, because they're not regulated. But it is the most important component in my personal view, and I'm saying that working for an advice company. But if people don't have access to guidance, then they can't understand their full range of options, and in such a way you can't understand your informed choices. So even if you're sat in front of an advisor, you need to know all of the options, because ultimately you're making the decision anyway. Someone might recommend a course of action, but knowing that that's the right course of action is so important for you. You shouldn't just kind of trust somebody and go along with it. And kind of that's where it can be a difficult line to cross. So we have an accreditation process for all of our advisors to go through to say, right, we really need to understand the difference between guidance and advice. Because they often give a lot of guidance within the advice process, but when you're in a setting like the workplace, we go in and kind of do education and guidance sessions, and they are pure education and guidance. And the kind of differentiator we put is, if your employee then wants to talk about advice and get a recommended course of action, it's them approaching us and we do it off-site. You know, they come to our office or we meet them elsewhere. It's their decision to come to us for advice. Whenever we're in the workplace, in that environment, or on a webinar, it's education and guidance. So then the employee as well feels like they've got control of what they're doing, and they're not talking to an advisor, and the stigma that comes around that, or the miscomprehension, not stigma. But yeah, so I think those are the kind of main differences. Yeah. I don't know if you've got any other thoughts, right?
No, definitely. And I think what we've tried to base our communications to companies on is that it tends to go on that natural progression, that typically there's a need for education and knowledge and understanding first. Then someone might feel a bit more confident and in the right place to possibly get guidance from somewhere. And then possibly it might be right for them to take advice. And that advice can be, whether, you know, again, on that scale, if somebody is in quite a bad place and needs to take advice from debt advisory firms, debt advice companies, charities, Step Change, of which we've worked with, or looking at life events and what's next, what is their areas of focus where they need advice on and can benefit from advice.
I think, just to add there, Ryan, the key thing, I think, from going from guidance to advice, there's obviously, like you said, lots of different avenues for advice. It's not necessarily the typical advice that you would think about, but it's also, you know, debt advice or specific advice on a certain issue. What we tend to find is the best approach for providers in your workplace is to work together collaboratively. So thinking about the different things that your employees want to talk about or the different issues that they'll have, then providers kind of working together as a panel and saying, you know what, if you're struggling with X, you know, we had a talk from Step Change. If you're struggling with debt, these are the people that would really help you in this scenario. Or if you're thinking about what to do with your pension or you've got long-term care issues, then a financial advisor would be appropriate. But kind of providing a selection of options for different experiences is really important. Sorry,
Yeah.
Ryan.
No, absolutely. Again, we try to break it down into 5. We like to break things down, make it simpler. But looking at once you've got an idea of what financial wellbeing actually is, because still lots of people don't quite understand what it is and the importance of it and the links to mental wellbeing and everything else, then you can look at what are the key areas I need to improve my own financial wellbeing, and that could be normally is definitely money management. So, you know, whatever stage of life we're at, most of us can improve in that. We might still have debts we want to clear or be better savers or budget better or manage our money better. But then looking at possibly 2 or 3 other areas that are coming up, whether it's getting on the property ladder or investing or modern retirement planning or protecting our incomes and families, whatever it might be. I think that's a key point, Harriet, that employers start to get panels of experts and specialists. Some they might already have in place because they'll typically will have an auto enrolment pension provider that should be providing some expertise and others. I know we're seeing a lot now on the guidance side, or coaching is another word for it, you know, money coaches, which is great to see. But as you say, that I think it being an unregulated space at the moment may well move into the regulated space possibly, which can only be a good thing. But yeah, definitely things to consider for employers. We see it a lot, Harriet. I don't know if you can talk a little bit about it, but just the barriers for people to advice. You know, there is stereotypes, there's stigmas, there's taboos. I have it so much when we speak to potential clients that they just feel unworthy of advice, that it's not for them, that it's only for a certain level of wealth or income. That's changing, I think, but I don't know if you wanted to share some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. One, it's just said my internet's unstable, which I think is quite a dramatic way of putting it, but hopefully it'll be okay. One side of it is there's this concept called advisor anxiety, and that's essentially where people feel they can't go and talk to an advisor because they don't know enough. But the reason you should talk to an advisor or somebody is to learn more. So you have people who don't know enough, so they don't talk to someone, so then they don't know more. And it's something that you can't get out of then. And what we need to do more on in the advice, you know, in the advisor provider space, is to break down that advisor anxiety, to kind of open up the doors a bit and help people understand what it is they'll benefit from. But another way is kind of this core education piece. If you've got a foundation level of knowledge that you feel comfortable with the basic principles, you'll feel more confident talking to people about it and asking questions, which will just continue to take you up in terms of financial well-being. So that's really important, and it is a barrier to people talking to anybody, not just advisors. Another one is about kind of the misunderstanding about advice, which kind of covers that as well. What is it that an advisor is going to talk to me about? You've got these kind of views of Wolf of Wall Street and stuff like that are just so far away from the truth now. But, you know, we've got one example, which is stockbroking. When you hear the word stockbroking, you do think Wolf of Wall Street, but actually stockbroking service is really important for people who are overweighted on a certain stock. And what you'll find is a lot of employees who have been at a company for a long time and taken advantage of the share save schemes are really overexposed in one company's stock, which is the company they work for. And it's brilliant, but actually a good point for workplaces is to talk to them about, right, okay, when it matures, it's then your decision in terms of your financial well-being. Is this still the right place to house it? You know, even if you keep doing it, are you overweighting yourself too much? those kind of things in lots of different areas are really important, but not front of mind when you start to think about money. So there's things like that, but I think, you know, we have a duty to start to open the doors on what advice means, what the journey is, and the checkpoints that you go through. And a lot of that first initial meeting is guidance. It's how do we get to know you? What's your life starting to look like? What are your goals? What are your values? So making sure that any investments or protection is in line with what you believe in. And that's really, really important and coming to the surface. And then we see things like financial well-being. Financial well-being is never going to be a straight upward curve, no matter how much education and guidance we put out there. People might have a really strong sense of well-being right now, but then in a couple of years' time, you might have a life event like losing a parent, and suddenly you're faced with an unexpected circumstance that brings with it financial challenges, like going through probate, dealing with wills, all of those kind of things. And that's where kind of workplaces are there. Your employees are going through it while they're still turning up to work, and having those checkpoints in place to say, do you know what, it's okay, we've got you. I think Hannah's point was really important earlier, not just providing them every so often, every quarter, a live session to talk about money, but actually housing that information somewhere that's really easily accessible, so that when someone is suddenly faced with that, they know exactly where to go without actually having realized that they knew where to go. So I think, long story short, I think there's loads of different barriers, but most of it is around miscomprehension of advice and not feeling like you know enough. And we can break that down with advice and guidance.
Definitely. And again, thanks for that, Harriet. I just see a lot that one of the biggest skills for advisors and advisor firms is being approachable and being relatable, and again, trying to demystify the misconception of that it's only for the wealthy. You know, that possibly that was the case maybe traditionally in times gone by, but that what financial planning actually is to plan your finances for life events. That's what it is. And as we go through life, so every employee at different stages will need access to the right education, the right guidance, and the right advice at each stage. So yeah, we see that all the time. So that's really important. And I think employers have the opportunity to start vetting, you know, providers and you know, organisations that are willing to offer this, so that longer term relationships can start to be built up, you know, so the right sort of organisations are working with your company, and employees can start to feel confident with the people that are almost an extension of that service, rather than, you know, right, a life event has happened, I now need to go and speak to an advisor. Where do I start? I don't know anyone. It can be, again, quite overwhelming and you know, just quite a challenge really for people. But if companies have got that relationship with certain organisations, then, and they've seen them maybe coming into their offices, or they've had dialogue or online sessions, group sessions, whatever it might be, then it could speed up the process and be you know, really beneficial for employees. Just looking at time, Nuz, I don't know if there was a few extra questions that have come in on the chat, or anything that could be asked for either Hannah or Harriet.
I think I did pick up a couple of questions, Nuz. I'm happy to pick those up if that would be all right.
Okay. Yeah,
go for it.
So one of them was from Jessica, I think a little bit earlier, about are there any kind of innovative solutions that you would recommend? And I think that is a really interesting question. Some stuff that we've seen or done, one is over the pandemic we had homeschooling resources for employees to support their children, and that was a really kind of new way of approaching it. We couldn't go into schools, and our kind of employees were having to homeschool their kids, so providing those kind of materials or things that are a bit different is really important. I've seen other companies, not many, providing time off to consider your finances particularly. A lot of the main ways people want to learn or deal with their finances is often in work time. I mean, in the practical sense, banks are open when you're working. You don't leave money worries at the door, unfortunately. It's always going to be on your mind. So actually being proactive and giving people the time to make proactive changes to their own finances can have a really, really good benefit for yourself, for the employer as well. But I think there's gamification as well and lots of platforms like that. But I think also when we think about innovative solutions, just don't overthink it. Right place, right time information, be there for the employees when they suddenly face some sort of change in their life that affects their financial well-being, and things like your salary sacrifice windows. Make sure those are the peak times that you're pushing information out when people have to make a decision about whether they're going to contribute more to their pension or engage in the salary sacrifice save as you earn scheme. How many of your employees are in the default pension fund because they've not engaged with it and made a decision for themselves as to what fund they want their workplace pension to be in? Those kind of questions that are all completely linked to the benefits that you're providing are the best places to start. And so I would just say, definitely just get the basics right and bring in people that can help you. And a lot of these providers will do it for free. If it's not going into in-depth bespoke work, those high-level presentations, there's a lot of free resource out there.
Thanks. Was there any other questions that you saw,
No,
Harriet?
yeah, I think with some of them, I have said with some of them we'll take one-to-ones, because I think it's an emerging topic, especially is where we are today with the current climate, that people and organizations are looking to ways to support the employees. And I think if there was one point that I was going to make is really finding those trusted partners that can give information or can support in terms of financial education or advice, that are accredited. You know, we have created a panel across these 6 sessions specifically for that purpose, in that these are the people we trust, be it from Step Change, be it like Benefits, the Money Charity, MAPS, you know, Salary Finance, and then of course all the work we're doing in Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing. The purpose of this journey is really to keep on talking about it and remove some of the barriers to understanding it, but also the destigmatization of the topic, because it's so sensitive. Going back to the example I think we had from Step Change, where they described how people were more comfortable talking about, you know, their personal lives and, you know, behind the doors topics rather than talking about money, was a light bulb moment. And it's also coming away from the perception that it's a certain type of demographic. This affects everyone at the moment. So coming away from this perception that, oh, it's perhaps our low earning employees, it's not always the case. It goes across the board. So I think just those are my reflections from my side.
Brilliant, thanks, Naz. Just to put everyone on the spot, especially Hannah and Harriet, just for employers, just as a takeaway, if people was to take away one main thing, I'll give you a bit of time to think about it. But yeah, what would you suggest the first step might be, or the key thing that they should think about with regards to their financial well-being? And if we come to Harriet is unmuted, so look, Harriet's ready to go.
To be honest, I think it's been mentioned before, but asking your employees what they want. That initial questionnaire, whether it's a questionnaire, there's also measurement tools out there that I really rate, that get a sense of your employee financial well-being and the key things they're struggling with. Because like Hannah said, your employee base is really young. I'd say ours is a particularly different demographic, much older, but like you're all going to be facing different things. So if you can get under the skin of that and start to frame it around that, I'd start with that, to be fair.
Brilliant, thanks, Harriet. And Hannah, you've had a bit of extra time to think about this now.
I'd say have a look at what you've already got. Don't just throw more stuff at people in terms of resources, because I was pretty surprised when I started looking under the bonnet at our existing providers as to how much stuff was already there. We just hadn't really communicated that particularly well, or weren't displaying it very well for people to access. So I think do have a look at, you know, things that you might not think of traditionally about financial well-being in particular. So LifeWorks, just in my head, I always thought LifeWorks was if you'd got some sort of emergency or needed immediate counselling, or it was a mental problem, mental health problem. But actually, I was really surprised at how much was already available when I started looking properly at it.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Hannah. And from me, I would just say, as Justine said, is start. You know, no one has got it sorted. No one has got like the perfect well-being strategy or financial well-being service. No one company can offer everything. That it's just not out there. So once you've looked at what you've got possibly, and then once you've asked the question of what's needed within your workforce, make a start, speak to a few different organizations and find ones that fit, you know, your ethics and your values and everything else, and then just work on improving it. You know, over time, this will take time to really improve and increase the sort of effectiveness and the impact that whatever initiatives you put together can take forward. So get started and not wait for, you know, for it to be perfect. I suppose you can always improve it. But yeah, just final, it would be worth saying that all of the organizations that have helped with the content for a lot of these sessions, their information is now on a financial wellbeing microsite that's available for employers. That's, you know, a resource that can be used as quite as an easy solution to start giving access to education, guidance and advice. So do get in touch if that's of interest or you want to know more about that. But Nuz, maybe if you just want to close us off, and we can hopefully see each other soon.
Yeah, no, a big thank you to everyone for joining us today. Some really interesting insights and discussions. A big thank you to Harriet and Hannah and Justine as well, who joined us today as well from the Money Charity. So we're really appreciative of all the support, etc. Continue the conversations, do reach out to one another, loads of contacts there, and we will be in touch with the recording, etc. So you'll be able to catch up on any other further points you need. And yeah, a big thank you for joining us today.